This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm sitting here with Jim Clendenen, a very good Scottish name there. Jim Clendenen, if you don't know him, is the force, the force of nature behind Au Bon Climat. How are you today, sir?
Great, Jamie. Great to be here.
Now, tell me a little bit about your entry into the wine world and how you started making wine.
Well, like a lot of people in my generation, I turned 21 living in France. All of my culture was very middle American from the 1950s and not very exciting from a gastronomic nor sort of beverage point of view. And going to France and turning 21 turned me on to wine legally. And so instead of drinking the crap that was about college campuses in the U.S., Annie Green Springs and Boone's Farm and stuff like that.
What kind of wines were those?
Those wines were fruit wines in America,
right,
and pretty non-ambitious. And I got a chance to drink Crozes Hermitage, and I actually did my physical turning 21 in Bordeaux, of all places, even though I'm not much of a Bordeaux fan these days, making more Burgundy style varieties. But we always say that. We always say that when you go to Bordeaux and you get exposed to the wine business there, you think you have to be a duke, a baron, or a count. You have to have a chateau, and you have to have 300 hectares of vines before you can think about having your own winery. When you go to Burgundy, you discover you just need a tractor, a place to park 36 barrels in your house, and 3 or 4 rows of vines, and you can be as important a vigneron if you have the right motivation and passion as your neighbors can be.
So you came back to California and started making wine.
Came back to California, graduated from college with a pre-law degree, and then had a choice of going to law school or travel and try to figure out what I wanted to do, and I chose the latter. So I went back to Champagne and to Burgundy, and that's when I discovered that you could have amazingly small means and still become a Burgundian modeled winemaker. And so I went back and started working for wineries in California. I did 3 vintages at Zaca Mesa and Santa Barbara. I did a vintage in the Hunter Valley in Australia, and then a vintage down in the Goulburn Valley, which is a great place to work with cool climate varieties, very close to the Mornington Peninsula. And then I wrapped up that year by working in Burgundy and at the Domaine Duc de Magenta in Chassagne-Montrachet. And took all those experiences, those 6 years or 6 harvests of making wine, packed into 4 years. And I started Au Bon Climat the following year with my original partner, Adam Tolmack, who I bought out after 9 years in the company.
And what's the philosophy behind ABC?
Handcrafted, very, very, very traditionally modeled wines made from Burgundian style varieties. So the great thing that's happened over time is that handcrafting and Burgundian modeling was always in place, but we've been vertically integrating by planting our own vineyards on leased land and owned land. And we've been able to develop a viticultural foundation for what was essentially a winemaking orientation in the beginning. And those two things have worked together over the last 30 years to allow us to make, I believe, some of the most consistent and European modeled styles of Pinot Noir made in the New World.
I think that's what really sets you apart from many of the producers in California right now, and that's one of the reasons I've been quite passionate about your wines over the years. Where do you see the Californian Pinot industry? I hate to use the I word, but where do you see that going these days?
I don't see all that many people rushing back to making balanced wine, but I see a lot of people talking about it. And the more people that talk about it, sooner or later, even if it takes them 5 or 10 years, they come back a little bit. It's been great to see that people making the most obnoxious style of American Pinot Noir rather than sort of world historical traditional styles of Pinot Noir. Now when they're making their presentations, beginning, instead of saying, I just got 98 from Parker, or I'm all sold out, how are you doing, my wines are more expensive than yours, now they're saying, what's wrong with high alcohol? What's so wrong with higher alcohol?
Well, how do you make that argument? How do
me?
they make that argument? Like, tell me how they can possibly.
Well, they can certainly make that argument if they don't believe that wine should be aged. I, of course, believe that wine should be age worthy, otherwise it can't be called great. If they say our products are designed for consumption right now, and if you buy into the notion that bigger is better, and bigger is better in no sense whatsoever. When's the last time you saw somebody build a cell phone that was 6 inches by 12 inches and say that they've made some improvements? And so the more bombastic and obvious you make something, the less interesting. Things have to be, especially fine wine, has to be couched in a little bit of mystery, a little bit of romance, a little bit of exoticity, some ethereal, some ephemeral characters. When you're in Burgundy and you're talking about greatness, nobody's talking about size. That would be vulgar. They're talking about finesse. They're talking about all the things that you can't quantify. When you can quantify numbers, I have 16% alcohol. When you can quantify tannins, color, I have an inky color. When you're saying things like, my wines blow someone's socks off, which is a great Robert Parker euphemism. if I wear socks, I want to keep them on. If I'm wearing sandals, I don't have any socks on, so it doesn't matter. But this concept of oodles and oodles of blows your socks off, blew my mind. For a short time, I suppose it works with wine. You know, when's the last time you went out for dinner to have your mind blown and with the beverages that you were consuming? You know, I go to have my intellect piqued.
Yes,
I go to have my senses awakened. I go to have things that are subtle transformations in my daily life, and the more subtle and the more interesting and the more things that I have to reflect upon, the greater the experience that I get on every level in my life.
Now, how has the 2010 vintage been working for you thus far?
You know that it's going to be smaller yields than I like these days.
Yep.
We've gotten to a point where I understand a little bit better why Burgundy always argued the 35 hectoliters per hectare to 45 were great places to start making Premier Cru and Grand Cru wines. And we kind of got to a point where we thought that 25 to 30 might be better in our new world situation. And point of fact, we don't even slow the vines down. So they tend to ripen with less balance than if we have 35 to 45, and we have that little, 10 to 15 to 20% more fruit in our vine situations where we have plenty of sun and plenty of photosynthesis. We tend to have better balance. The sugars don't accumulate quite so quickly, and by accumulating a little bit more slowly, we maintain better pHs and better acidities, and so things come into a better convergence when they come to the cellar. This year we thought we were going to be quite late, and because the yields are so low, we're starting kind of at a normal time. I don't think it's going to be a fantastic vintage. 09 was a fantastic vintage. We salvaged 08 by fighting frost really well, but I think it's going to be an intense vintage. So I'm going to say a vintage, and people are going to kind of wince maybe, like 06, where the structure is a little bit firm, really good acidity, and the wines are really bright, and they start off tightly wound, but they develop quite quickly. I think our 06s right now are delicious. There have been a couple of Pinot Noir tastings, including this famous one that they just had down in Wellington, where they had wines of the world internationally. And
I was there for that.
So maybe you noticed that wine letter D was commented from the podium and well respected, and that was Au Bon Climat Isabelle.
Yeah, it was very highly thought of amongst my fellow tasters at that particular seminar.
Yeah, certainly my friends it was Steve Smith from Craggy who came over and got the wine, and he thought it was okay. But my friends who were winemaking buddies from my consulting days down there really thought it was a smart wine. It sort of showed quite well. And that was our 06, which was not a generous wine on any level, but blind in the context of French wines and Kiwi wines and Australian wines, I think it showed up pretty well.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for joining us today at Good Food Revolution on this rather overcast Toronto day. Let's get back to Fête de Pinot Noir and have some lunch.
Let's have some lunch with some great Pinot.
Thank
you, Jamie.
Bye-bye.
Okay.